In the mid-1800s, deep within the misty hollows of southern Appalachia, a man named Elias Patterson roamed the rugged terrain. A seasoned woodsman with a weathered face and a heart hardened by years of solitude, Elias lived alone in a small cabin by the river. One evening, as twilight descended and the mountains cast long shadows, he set out to check his traps before nightfall. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the rustling leaves and the distant call of an owl. Elias moved with practiced stealth, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the underbrush. As he approached a small clearing, he noticed something peculiar. A deer, standing stock still in the center of the glade. Its silhouette seemed almost to blend with the encroaching darkness. Elias squinted, trying to discern what felt off about the creature. He noticed that the deer, while standing still, was shaking. Not only that, but its legs were too long, its body too slender, and its movements too jerky, as if it were not accustomed to its own skin. He raised his rifle, aiming carefully, but something in the back of his mind urged him to hold his fire. The deer turned its head towards him, and Elias's heart skipped a beat. The eyes that met his were not the gentle, doe-like eyes he expected, but cold, dark orbs that faced forward and seemed to bore into his soul. The knot deer opened its mouth, revealing a row of sharp teeth, and let out a low, guttural growl that echoed through the forest. Elias took a step back, his rifle still trained on the creature. "What in God's name are you?" he whispered, more to himself than to the beast. The knot deer took a step forward, its movements disjointed and unnatural, like a puppet on frayed strings. Fear seized Elias, and he fired a shot. The sound of the gunshot shattered the silence, but the creature did not fall. Instead, it reared up on its hind legs and let out an unearthly scream that made Elias's blood run cold. He stumbled backward, his mind racing. This was no ordinary animal. It was something ancient, something that didn't belong in this world. Without thinking, Elias turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could hear the creature's pursuit, his footsteps heavy and relentless. The forest seemed to close in around him, the trees like silent sentinels witnessing his flight. Finally, he burst into the clearing where his cabin stood. He slammed the door behind him, bolting it shut. His heart pounded in his chest as he fumbled for a lantern, lighting it with trembling hands. The dim light cast flickering shadows on the walls. He could hear the creature circling outside, its growls growing fainter as the night wore on. Minutes turned to hours as Elias sat in his chair, facing the front door. He held his gun, trained on the door, not daring to move. His muscles grew sore as time moved slowly. But Elias remained vigilant, or so he thought. Suddenly, his eyes opened. He had fallen asleep, sometime during the night, though it was still dark out. He then noticed the sound that awoke him, a slight creaking. He looked at the front door, which of course was still shut. No, The sound was not coming from in front of him. The sound was coming from behind where he sat. In his fit of fear, Elias had forgot that he himself built this cabin with 2 doors. This was not common in the cabins he had seen before. He thought himself smart for including it, but now he realized his fatal mistake. The creaking stopped, yet Elias dared not turn around. He sat there, still as an oak tree, waiting, but no other sounds came. After what felt like days, the sun finally rose. Light seeped through the trees and through the window to the cabin, and finally, Elias built up the courage to move. He turned around, looking towards the second room in his cabin, the kitchen. That's where he had put his back door. Did not see nor hear anything. Elias stood, walking over to the other room. He peered his head around the corner and saw nothing. He saw nothing. The door was shut, the kitchen just as he left it. Nothing was out of place. This was what ensured his death. Elias took this to mean he was crazy. He had been alone for far too long, or perhaps he had relied on less than reliable foods. Or perhaps he had relied on less than reliable foods. He saw no sign that what he witnessed the night before was a reality, and so he decided that it could not have been real. But if Elias had taken the time to inspect the door further, he would have seen it. On the other side of the door, on the other side of the door, a gross sinew and dried blood hung, dripping from the door handle. Of course, the inside of the cabin was left clean. It's too clever for that. Seeing as it was nearing the end of autumn, Elias decided to wait until spring before he would make the move back down the mountain, back towards civilization. But Elias wouldn't make it to spring. He wouldn't make it to the next day. Now it knew how to get in. It knew how Elias would try to defend himself. It knew. It always knows. And if it doesn't, it will find out. It is a clever thing. Again, Elias set out that evening to check his traps. And again, he returned to his cabin. But when he stepped inside, he heard no creaking sound. He heard no sound at all. Nothing. There was anyone round to check up on old Elias, all they would have found the next morning would be dried blood, and a lot of it. But nothing else. There wouldn't have been anything left to him. It wastes not, but it does want. It wants for human flesh, and it will have it. Just like all who wander aimlessly into the mountains of old Appalachia, Elias saw into the depths of hell itself, into the depths of the mountain.